So, escape from freedom. What is freedom and why do we want to escape from it? A free person has to think for themselves. They don't have ready answers about what is right and what is wrong, who they are and what they should be doing with their time, with their energy, with their life, what is fair, what is unfair, what the society should be like, and so on. They have to figure it out on their own. More than that, they need to take responsibility for their own life, for their feelings, behaviors, for the way they spend their time to see bad things in society, and they need to do something to change it. And in this way, it is always comfortable to choose some easy road, like become religious, and then you don't really need to think. Do these things and you're a good boy and will get to heaven. Do those things and you're a bad boy and will go to hell. Don't worry if there is any injustice, stupidity or cruelty around you. God will punish them all. So you can be calm and not do anything at all. Many people, even if they're in grown-up bodies, they are still children inside and they still seek for outside guidance. That is why they call God our Father, because they want this Father from the sky who is always right and always fair to tell them what to do and what not to do, so that they can escape from their own responsibility and freedom. We are not taught from our childhood to be free. On the contrary, since our childhood, we learn to follow authorities and do what they tell us to do. Parents often do not explain us why they want us to do something. They use shame, guilt, and different kinds of manipulation to make us do it. In this way, our new modern liberal parents are even worse than strict parents of the past, because strict parents of the past just say, I need you to do this, and you go and do it. And they don't take any no for answer. Today parents, they say that I'd love you to do that. You know how much I love you and care for you. And they use all kinds of subtle manipulation to force you into doing it. And they do not just ask you to follow what they do, but they also ask you to smile and welcome this oppression. So we are constantly, since childhood, trained to follow authority. This is why independent critical thinking, taking responsibility for our lives, self-discipline can seem to us like a huge burden. Have you ever felt like you're tired to be yourself, like you want to be someone else, or even better, not exist, because the feelings that you have from this existence are overwhelming? If you look into society, into yourself, into others for a long time, they just all falls apart and you find yourself in chaos without any solid ground, and you have to find this ground on your own. This can feel overwhelming, this can feel so powerful that somebody might want to die. You can imagine that there is nothing you can do, that it is always going to be that hard. But this is wrong. You can get used to being free, and you can figure out all these problems one by one. But you'll say, if for example you cannot stop death, why to say that death is bad? If you cannot stop injustice, why to say that injustice is bad? Maybe it's better to rationalize it and see the positive side of it. But no, it's not. Because it's not only knowledge that we transfer from one generation to another, we also transfer our techniques, our instruments, our methods of thinking. It is much more important to teach someone critical thinking rather than give them ready-made answers, because then they can apply this critical thinking to different situations. And it is very important to teach people to follow what is true and to be okay saying that there is some problem but they don't know the answer yet, instead of imagining some answer or imagining that the problem doesn't exist, because then you transfer this way of thinking into the future to other people. And this way we can avoid this fate of an elephant. You know, this elephant whom they attach to a stick and it's too small to get away from the stick, but then it grows up, but still thinks that he's too small to get away from the stick, even if he's big and very powerful now. So we don't want people to face the same thing. We don't want them, for example, going around saying that death is wonderful and not even trying to solve it. Because at some point, people might have a solution. We need to practice this constant critical thinking and thinking about things even if we cannot change them right now, just so that in the future people still see them as a problem instead of following some rationalization. So in what ways do we escape from freedom? First way is Masochism, and it doesn't only refer to sexual practice but has a wider meaning. Being free and thinking independently means that you have to face this existential anxiety, existential loneliness, And in order to avoid it, masochists want to become part of something bigger. We want to identify ourselves with our country, and this way to feel powerful and great. That many years ago some people won in the war, and through their suffering we raise our own self-esteem. Using drugs, including alcohol, is also a form of masochism, but you give away this individuality to this drug instead. And in this way, it's really funny how they portray alcohol and drugs as some rebellion. In reality, alcohol and drugs is ways to escape freedom. It doesn't change anything. It is no rebellion at all. It's just stupid and weak. The same masochism we can see in parents who give away their life and focus all their energy on their children to live through their children. Everyone thinks that they are such wonderful people, sacrifice everything for their family, but in reality they are too afraid to be on their own. They are too afraid to get to know who they are, what they want, what are their goals. So they decide to take this easy road and to place the responsibility of their life onto their children. Second form of escape from freedom is sadism. Masochist wants to become a small part of a whole, like a small part of a big corporation, a small part of a country, to join some religion or some club, or to madly fall in love with someone who will tell them what to do. But sadists also have this existential anxiety. They also want to escape their freedom, but they gain this sense of significance, control and safety not by being controlled by others, but by controlling others. Taking others into their power eases this fear they actually have inside. Deep inside, they are exactly the same as masochists. And actually, normally, the same person is sadist and masochist at the same time, just in relation to different things. Like, for example, Hitler was sadistic towards people, but he was masochistic towards fate, because he believed in fate. We can also see some religious fanatic who is very masochistic in relationship with God and with religion, but can be a huge sadist towards his own children and family. Third way of escaping freedom is this drive towards destruction. Each of us gains a sense of power, control, happiness and joy when we do something and it is reflected on the outside reality. But healthy people who have empathy developed, who have creativity developed, can do it in a positive way by loving others, helping others, realizing their potential, engaging in creativity, and this way stepping out of their solitude, stepping out of their isolation, stepping out of their isolated self and engaging with the world. But some people have been so traumatized that they do not have the capacity to be empathic towards others. They don't find any way in which to express themselves and to create something good. And so they gain this sense of power, control and purpose by hurting others, by humiliating, by destroying, by killing. Because otherwise they feel completely isolated and lonely, and they cause suffering to others to gain at least some sense of unity, some sense of connection. Cynicism is also a way of avoiding freedom, but cynics do not pretend that they don't see the injustice, but they get scared and don't take any responsibility to actually change it, so they abandon the whole thing and go around saying how it's impossible to change, it has always been like that, and there is nothing you can do to change it at all. And once they betrayed and crushed their own dreams, their own aspirations, their own sense of justice and what is right, and now they do this to their own children and to other people as well. Fromm calls this drive to destruct while you're not able to create impotence. And fourth, the most common form of escaping freedom is conformism. You just assume some role that you play. You do not think for yourself. You take something you heard and retell it as your own opinion. You just copy-paste it from the outside world. You just copy-paste it from what is normal. And as you don't have your own personality anymore, you don't really have any existential anxiety or feeling of isolation and loneliness. You just melt into everyone else. At the same time, on the surface, such person thinks they are unique. They are not like everyone else. After all, they have their own favorite color and their own horoscope sign, some unique style in their appearance, so they can pretend they are real. There can be feelings, thoughts, desires that we subjectively think to be our own, while in reality they are just acquired from the outside world. Like people who look at some Van Gogh painting and pretend they admire it. Well, in reality, they don't really care. They just think they are supposed to be admiring it. And the more conformist we are, the better it is for consumerist society. Because if you have so many people that resemble each other so much, it is very easy to make them want the same thing and produce it in mass quantities. Fromm calls this conformist thinking as pseudo-thinking. So what freedom is? Freedom goes hand in hand with responsibility and self-discipline. The problem with discipline is that ever since childhood we are forced so many times to do something that doesn't have any sense, in which we are not invested at all, that we start hating the discipline itself and we start rebelling against it. But rebelling in a childish way that doesn't change anything. Like, for example, somebody is forced to work 8 hours per day on their workplace, and then they go home and they don't want to do anything, they just sit in front of TV. This is like a childish rebellion against discipline. In reality, discipline is an essential instrument for our freedom. But I very much like humanistic psychology, talking about Erich Fromm in particular now, is that they see mental illness or some mental trouble not always as some weakness or illness. Sometimes it is a healthy reaction of a healthy person to the unhealthy world. Sometimes people who have some mental issues, they are not weaker than everyone else. They see things clearer than everyone else. And the goal of helping them to get out of their mental problems or out of their depression is not to turn them into conformists and make them do what others do, but to help them have a voice, to help them stand up and to help them tell others what they see, to help them change what they think to be stupid, unfair, or cruel. Next important point about freedom is that when we talk about freedom, we often talk about freedom from something, freedom from oppression, freedom from insecurity. But the most important thing is not freedom from, but freedom for. Many people are not free exactly because they do not have a why to be free. A truly free person does not just rebel against society. They have their goals, and they act to achieve them. Free people do not just step out of comfort zone, they step out of there and they welcome some discomfort and pain and go through it to achieve a goal that they see. What about democracies? We all know that in totalitarian governments everyone is oppressed and so on. But how does it work in democracies? In democracies you do not need this exterior oppression because people inside are not free and they escape from this freedom. They do not think independently and they are not taught to think independently. And if they don't have anything to say, they don't really need this freedom of speech and they don't really use it. So there is even no need to restrict it. And this lack of inner freedom in individuals is exactly what makes it so easy to turn any country, any society into something authoritarian. Remember that experiment that was made in the United States where people were told that the experiment is about memory, so they were to give electroshock to an actor if the actor didn't answer the right thing, but they didn't know it was an actor. So the majority of people would even give lethal electroshock to this person, even when this person was crying and begging them to stop, just because there was some important looking guy in a white doctor clothing sitting near them and saying that it's absolutely essential that they continue. The real problem in democracies is not that there are some totalitarian governments in other countries. The real problem is that in their own institutions, in every individual, there are the same prerequisites that can lead to authoritarianism in their own country. So this is essential to cultivate this inner freedom in people. Unlike totalitarian societies, in democracies we are not controlled with pain and punishment, but mostly with pleasure. When we get some new objects or some new foods or something, we think that we buy them, but in reality we are selling ourselves to them, because we spend our time, we spend our energy, we spend our life on earning money, and then we spend this money on these goods. Every time we buy something, we give a part of ourselves to it. So to many people the burden of freedom seems huge, but it only seems this way because we are not used to it, because we are not trained for this since childhood, and we need to learn it on our own. This fear of freedom reminds some fear of monster that you see on the street, and then you realize it was just a tree, and then you're not afraid anymore. The same works with fear. As long as you escape from your own fear, as long as you run away from it, it seems strong and too powerful. But when you look it in the eyes and see it for what it is, you become surprised you were ever afraid of it. Living this life of conformism is worse than facing reality, and living in illusions is worse than facing the truth. Because when you base your feeling of safety on illusions, you don't actually have stable grounds. It's all shaking underneath you. But when you see the truth, it might not be as you want it to be, but at least you can be sure that you stand on a solid ground, and from there you can build and you can create and you can change. It is scary to be alone, it is scary to live, it is scary to die, it is scary to exist. But what is even worse is to realize at the end of your life that you're dying without truly having been born, that your whole life was some pretense, some role, something fake, and that you don't really have any real contact with yourself and others. And this way, conformism and inaction is the worst mistake you can ever make. Have a beautiful day. Goodbye.